GoPro Hero 9 versus the DJI Osmo Action. Which one is a better action camera slash vlogging camera? Hey guys, welcome back to the studio. This is Susie with Gemini Connect. If you've been following our channel for a while, then you know that we are big fans of GoPro. Ever since the Hero 7, we've been using the GoPro as our primary vlogging camera, and we go out and do a lot of action in terms of camping and hiking in the wilderness here in the Pacific Northwest. But a lot of you guys are always asking us whether the DJI Osmo Action is a suitable camera to replace or even compete with the GoPro. So spoiler alert, I don't think that DJI is better than GoPro. I think there are 7 things in particular that GoPro does better. However, DJI is not that far behind, and there are 3 things that I think that they do better than GoPro. So in this video, I'm going to talk more about those specific features, but first we're going to start with a little history of the DJI Osmo Action in case you're not familiar with this camera, and I'm also going to talk about some of the common features that these 2 cameras have. So DJI is primarily known for their drones and even their gimbals, but the Osmo Action was their very first action camera, and it looks a lot like GoPro because it was made to compete with GoPro. It came out in May 2019, so right after the Hero 7, but right before the Hero 8 came out. As of right now, April 2021, there is no replacement for the Osmo Action. This is the only action camera in the DJI lineup. At the time of its release, the DJI Osmo Action was really revolutionary because it was one of the first action cameras to come with a built-in front-facing screen. GoPro did eventually catch up, but it wasn't until October 2020 with the release of the Hero 9 that it finally had a front-facing screen included. When the Osmo Action first came out, it was priced at $350 US, which was really comparable to GoPro. But as of right now, the Osmo Action, because it is a little bit older at this point, it's fallen to roughly $200 or even less. So you can really get a nice deal on the Osmo Action if it's a camera that you want to check out. GoPro, in the meantime, has increased the price of the camera, and the Hero 9 is the most expensive GoPro that they've ever released. Now let's move on to some common features. Both the GoPro and the Osmo Action are considered action cameras, so they're tough as well as waterproof. You can use both of these cameras without an additional housing in up to 10 meters for GoPro and 11 meters underwater for the DJI Osmo Action. Both cameras can also shoot in photo or video mode. The photos can be in either RAW or JPEG, but the GoPro does have a slightly higher resolution as of the Hero 9. Those photos are now 20 megapixels versus the Osmo Action, which is 12 megapixels. Both cameras also use the traditional GoPro mount, but for GoPro, as of the Hero 8 and the Hero 9, you now have the little mount built directly into the camera, so you no longer have to stick this camera into a housing. For the Osmo Action, it is more similar to the Hero 7 and below in that you do have to use this plastic frame to add the little GoPro feet to your camera to mount it somewhere. But the nice thing about that GoPro mount is because it's been around for so long, there are so many GoPro accessories that you can use either one of these cameras with. As I mentioned earlier, both cameras now do have a front-facing screen. However, in the case of the Osmo Action, you have to make a choice whether you have the front-facing screen or the back-facing screen enabled. They're not on at the same time. Versus the Hero 9, you can have both the front-facing screen and the back-facing screen on at the same time. And even though both cameras do have an auto function so that you can just run and gun shoot, you can override that by selecting manual on either the Osmo Action or the GoPro. The Osmo Action also does have spot metering, which you can turn off and on, but I would recommend turning that off because if not, then your exposure can jump all over the place. And finally, both cameras are capable of doing in-camera time lapses and hyperlapses in video format. A hyperlapse, if you're not familiar, is basically like a moving time lapse, but it comes with stabilization, and so those are super great for showing the passage of time as you're also moving in a shot. So now that we talked about the common features, let's dive deeper into those 7 features that I think make the GoPro Hero 9 better than the DJI Osmo Action. First of all is image quality. Both cameras are capable of shooting in up to 4K 60. However, the GoPro does have an edge in that the Hero 9 now allows you to shoot in 5K. And that can be really great if you want larger resolution or the ability to crop into your frame. And in my opinion, even when shooting in 4K, the GoPro Hero 9 has a cleaner, sharper, and overall just nicer looking image than the one that comes out of the DJI Osmo Action. But there is a little bit of gray area in terms of image quality. Both cameras are able to shoot in flat color profiles so that you can color grade in post-production. For GoPro, that's just known as a flat color profile versus GoPro color, and on the Osmo Action, it's known as D-Cine-like. And for the Osmo Action, if you shoot in flat, you can arguably have slightly more control and color grade that footage better than the one that comes directly out of the GoPro. But that, again, is kind of subjective and also depends on how much post-processing you're willing to do and what your exact methodology is. The Osmo Action is also able to shoot in HDR video, but not everybody likes HDR because sometimes your footage can look really unnatural. But even worse, when you're shooting an HDR video, you have your image stabilization or RockSteady turned off, so your footage ends up looking really choppy. So even though HDR video can arguably make your image quality look better, it comes at a pretty big cost. The next feature to talk about is image stabilization. So both GoPro and the Osmo Action have their own forms of electronic image stabilization. For GoPro, that's known as Hypersmooth, which first came out with the Hero 7, and for the Osmo Action, it's known as RockSteady. Now, the Hero 9 does have a giant advantage over the Osmo Action because Hypersmooth is now in its 3rd version, and with each version it keeps getting better and better. And so even though both cameras do crop in a little bit when you have that image stabilization enabled, the footage that results is so buttery smooth. I think RockSteady is actually pretty good, but GoPro still has the advantage just because they've been working on their Hypersmooth stabilization for a lot longer. So I think that the footage looks a lot smoother with GoPro, but DJI is not far behind. And I'd really like to see how they improve this in future models. We have different backgrounds, we do different things, and so yeah, I think it's really interesting that people are more willing to tell their stories these days through vlogging.
Yeah, so that is in a way a bit of an antidote to all this virtual craziness that's upon us.
So both cameras, I don't know exactly where the microphones are in the Osmo Action, but you should be able to stand behind the camera and still be picked up pretty well. So this is a good test for both GoPro and Osmo Action.
Yeah, one thing to say here is the DJI has a cage that it ships with, right? And GoPro has feet, so it doesn't need a cage currently.
Yeah. The next feature is something called digital lenses. This came out originally with the GoPro Hero 8, and it keeps getting better with the Hero 9, but that's the ability to crop in camera. So within the GoPro, you can now choose between shooting super wide, wide, linear with horizon leveling, and narrow. And that just gives you some more flexibility when you're shooting your footage. Compare that to the Osmo Action, which only has a super wide field of view and also a de-warp function, which eliminates some of that circular banding on your images. But if you want to do any cropping with it, then you have to do that in post-production, and you can't do that in camera. But the thing we really love about the GoPro, the Hero 9 in particular, is that new function called linear with horizon leveling. So when you shoot in linear, you no longer have that circular kind of GoPro look that a lot of people didn't like about shooting with GoPro. You can now get a pretty straight-on shot. And when you have horizon leveling enabled, you can have your GoPro be at funky angles, but your horizon stays straight. And that is such a game changer for vlogging and action, and that's something that is not present on the Osmo Action at this moment. The next feature to discuss is slow motion video. Now, for us vloggers, we don't really use slow motion too much, but if you do action in particular, then slow motion video is very important. Both of these cameras are able to do slow motion, so on the Hero 9 you can now shoot in up to 2.7K at 120 frames per second, or 1080p at 240 frames per second. 240 frames per second is a lot slower than 120. On the Osmo Action, you can only shoot it up to 1080 at 240 frames per second or 120 frames per second. So if you really value shooting slow motion at a higher resolution, then the GoPro Hero 9 is probably going to be better for you. Next up is battery life. The Osmo Action only has a 1-hour battery life when shooting in 4K versus the Hero 9, which has a 2-hour battery life when shooting in 4K. That makes a lot of sense because that Hero 9 is a slightly bigger camera, and it actually came out with a bigger and more powerful battery. So it does last a lot longer than the Osmo Action. Both cameras can be recharged via USB-C, so you can just plug them into an external battery and juice them up that way. Next up is sound quality. Now, both the Osmo Action and the GoPro have internal microphones, and they actually sound pretty decent. There are some people that do say for the Hero 9 that when you're using the internal microphones that there is an audible popping or clicking noise that happens, but we personally haven't experienced that. We've had our fair share of issues with the GoPro Hero 9, but audio issues are not one of them. So that may or may not happen to you, versus on the Osmo Action, I don't think there's been any really significant audio issues with those microphones. I do think that the Osmo Action is better at isolating voices and picking up less external noise versus the GoPro, which is still pretty good, but I just noticed a lot more external noise. We're back testing the Osmo Action and the GoPro Hero 9, both with stabilization on. At first glance, I actually think RockSteady is pretty good. I mean, I think GoPro is better because GoPro has been working on Hypersmooth for like 3 generations now.
Well, DJI has stabilization technology in their drones already, which can include even gimbals and things like that, and they know what they're doing.
Yeah, so it's actually not bad. And in terms of sound, the first clips that I reviewed so far, I think the internal mics on the Osmo Action are pretty good. I think they even did a better job isolating our voices and drowning out a lot of the background noise, which will be a good test right now.
Yeah, there's some noise right now.
Because we've got quite a few cars going by. And yeah, since we are using internal mics on the GoPro, which we don't do very often, this is also a very good test for that. But the real advantage to the GoPro is that if you don't want to use those internal microphones, there are easy ways to replace them with external microphones. So with GoPro, they have the official media mod, which you can use with the Hero 8 or the Hero 9. And the media mod not only includes some extra ports, but it also has built-in microphones, which I think are a lot better than the internal mics on the GoPro. Alright, this is a sound test with the Osmo Action and the GoPro Hero 9. The Hero 9 is in the media mod, and the media mod should be the front-facing microphone. So this is what it sounds like testing both cameras and their microphones.
When it came out, it had a strong case because it was the only screen that was facing you. But now that GoPro has caught up, it's less of a case. It really comes down to the image quality and the sound quality.
But if you don't want to use the media mod, there's also the GoPro mic adapter, which is an official GoPro accessory, and that allows you to add an external microphone as well. In our experience, external microphones do make a world of difference with sound. And so we have another video comparing various external mics on the GoPro Hero 9, link in the description if you want to check that video out. Now in the Osmo Action, to my knowledge, there is not an official DJI mic adapter. There is a mic adapter that DJI endorses, but it's actually made by a third-party company, and it's kind of questionable if that mic adapter works. This third-party mic adapter also is kind of a strange shape, so you're not able to use it with a lot of Osmo Action cages, and in some cases you have to get a brand new case just to use it. And so for that reason, and because I value adding an external microphone a lot to my camera, then I really think that GoPro is better in terms of the sound quality, but also the flexibility to add your own microphone. And the final things that the GoPro Hero 9 has over the Osmo Action are GPS and an HDMI port. GPS is built into the camera. You can have it on or off. If you have it on, just note that it might drain your battery a little bit, but it's at least an option. And for HDMI, it only comes if you get the media mod, but having an HDMI port is really nice if you want to view your videos on a larger screen. And for the Osmo Action, it doesn't come with either GPS or an HDMI port. So if those are two things really important to you, then you're going to have to go with GoPro. So those are 7 features that the GoPro has over the Osmo Action. But GoPro isn't perfect, and we haven't been shy in this channel about talking about the various GoPro problems that we've been having with this camera. So there are 3 things in particular that I think the DJI Osmo Action actually does better than GoPro. The very first thing is ease of use. The Osmo Action has a totally different menu system than GoPro, and it can take some practice to get used to it, but overall I think it's a lot more intuitive and easier to use than the GoPro's menu. The Osmo Action also has a lot more physical buttons. There are 3 buttons instead of just 2 on the GoPro, and there's a lot of different ways you can use those buttons to control the Osmo Action. For example, there's the QS or quick switch button on the side, and you can use that to switch screens or shooting modes. The back LCD screen is also a touch screen, and you can double tap with 2 fingers to switch between the front and back screen. Feature number 2 that's better on the Osmo Action is its overall responsiveness. So this is kind of a new problem in the Hero 9, but this back touch screen has been super laggy, and GoPro even released a firmware update that promised to make the touchscreen more responsive, but it's still pretty bad. Now compare that to the Osmo Action. The touchscreen is super fast and super responsive, and it's not just the touchscreen, it's also just the buttons in general. When you turn on the camera, it boots up really quickly, also boots down really quickly, and on the Hero 9 there's always a noticeable delay. And so it's just a lot faster and easier to use this camera on the field. And along those lines, I have yet to experience any freeze-ups or bugs when using the Osmo Action. With GoPro, it's been a consistent problem ever since we started using GoPros with the Hero 7. There's always been freezing issues or bugs. I think, on the Hero 9, it actually started out pretty bad. I think that after the 3rd or 4th firmware update, a lot of those bugs have gone away. So we no longer have freezing issues as much on the Hero 9. But the Osmo Action was just such a breath of fresh air because it does exactly what you want it to do when you ask it to do it. And that's something that GoPro just really struggles with for some reason. And the third feature that the Osmo Action does a lot better than GoPro is the phone app. So there's a phone app called the DJI Mimo app. And the one thing that's actually kind of, annoying about it is that when you first get the Osmo Action and you power it on, you can't start using the camera until you connect it to the DJI Mimo app and activate the camera. But other than that, the DJI Mimo app just has overall better usability and functionality when it comes to remote controlling your camera and also editing your video afterward. Compare that to the GoPro app. There is an app for GoPro, and I actually think it connects really well to cameras. I never have a problem with that. But the issue I have is that the GoPro app keeps taking away essential features. So recently, as of the Hero 9, you can no longer live preview your shot as you're filming, and also GoPro took away the ability to edit your Pro Tune settings. Versus on the DJI app, it's super easy to do both of those functions and even more. So DJI definitely wins in terms of their smartphone app. So which camera is better, the GoPro Hero 9 or the DJI Osmo Action? I really think it depends on which features are most important to you. For us, we value having the highest image quality possible, and right now that's definitely going to be the GoPro, mostly because it's able to shoot higher resolution, and in general I think its image is more stable and looks a lot better than what's coming out of the DJI Osmo Action. With that said though, DJI is not that far behind GoPro, and GoPro is actually a model or 2 ahead of DJI at this point. So if DJI does release a follow-up to the original Osmo Action, I think it'll be a lot closer, if not surpass GoPro, but that hasn't happened yet. However, the DJI Osmo Action does have a huge advantage in responsiveness and just consistency. This camera, again, whenever you turn it on and ask it to do something, it responds really quickly and it never freezes or has bugs, compared to GoPro, which is always a little bit laggy and does have its fair share of freezing problems. So if you want a super reliable and consistent camera, then DJI is definitely going to win in that regard. So again, really depends on how you plan to shoot, what features are most important to you, but for us, we still think GoPro wins, but DJI is pretty close. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'd love to hear your conclusion of GoPro versus DJI, and let me know any questions. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.